My name is Jack, and I live in this bustling yet slightly indifferent city. Every day is like a clockwork, regular but monotonous. My wife, Ellie, is the brightest color in this otherwise dull life. She has hair as dazzling as the sun's rays, soft and silky, and when it gently sways in the breeze, it looks like golden wheat waves swaying in the wind. Beneath that blonde hair is a face as delicate as a work of art, with fair skin tinged with a light blush, as if it were a flower that has just bloomed in the morning. Her eyes are the most charming thing about her, like the deep blue ocean, with no bottom in sight, as if hiding countless secrets and stories. Her long eyelashes are like two small fans, and every time she blinks, they tickle the strings of my heart. Her nose is small but straight, her lips full and rosy. Every time she smiles, her smile is like the warm spring sun, instantly dispelling all the gloom in my heart. Ellie's figure is even more mesmerizing. She is tall with straight, slender legs. When she walks down the street, her light, graceful steps attract the attention of countless people. Her waist is slender and can be held in one hand, and her plump breasts and rounded buttocks form a perfect curve, as if they were nature's most outstanding masterpiece. Every movement of hers exudes a charming charm that makes me fall deeply in love. We lived in a small, cozy house. Every morning, I would wake up to her smile and we would prepare breakfast together. Although it was just simple bread and milk, it tasted full of happiness. In the evening, we would sit on the sofa together, watching TV and sharing our joys and sorrows of the day. I always thought that although such a life was plain, it would always be happy. However, fate always likes to play jokes. That evening, the afterglow of the sunset was spreading across our yard, and Ellie and I were enjoying the peaceful moment. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I got up to answer the door and saw a strange man. His name was Henry, a scientist with deep, unfathomable eyes and a strange aura about him, as if he didn't belong in this world. The way he looked at Ellie made me feel uneasy for some reason. And when Ellie saw him, the smile on her face also seemed to become a little unnatural. At that moment, I vaguely felt that our peaceful life might be broken, and this Henry would be a huge variable in our lives. Ever since Henry suddenly appeared in our home, a heavy stone has been weighing on my heart, and I have never been able to let go. On the surface, Ellie is still gentle and considerate, but I can keenly sense a flash of panic and evasion in her eyes from time to time. That afternoon, the sun lazily shone on the living room floor as I sat on the sofa flipping through an old magazine, trying to dispel my unease. Suddenly, a loud knock on the door broke the tranquility. My heart tightened, and an ominous feeling came over me. I slowly got up and walked to the door. Looking through the peephole, I saw it was Henry again. He was wearing a somewhat worn black trench coat, with the collar slightly open, revealing a slightly wrinkled white shirt underneath. His hair was slightly messy, but there was a firmness in his eyes. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Henry smiled politely at me, but the smile made me feel a little hypocritical. "Jack, I want to talk to Ellie again about genetic mutations. I hope you don't mind." His voice was low and hoarse, as if it carried a kind of mesmerizing power. Before I could answer, Ellie had already walked out of the room, her footsteps a little hurried, and an unnatural blush on her face. "Henry, why are you here again?" Ellie's voice trembled slightly, and her eyes revealed a hint of surprise and nervousness. Henry's gaze was instantly attracted to Ellie, and his eyes flashed with an unusual light, as if a hungry wolf had seen its prey. "Ellie, I have some new research results that I want to share with you." His voice was soft, as if he were whispering to a lover. I frowned, my anger rising. "Henry, I don't think you should keep interrupting our lives like this. Ellie isn't interested in these scientific studies," I said, trying to stop their conversation. But Ellie gently tugged at the hem of my shirt, her eyes pleading. "Jack, just listen to him for a moment. It might be really important," she said. Looking at Ellie's pitiful expression, my anger instantly dissipated, and I could only helplessly nod my head. Henry smiled triumphantly, walked into the living room, sat on the sofa, and began to talk incessantly about his so-called genetic mutation research. Ellie was listening intently, her eyes sparkling with excitement, and she asked questions from time to time. Watching them interact so warmly, I felt like an outsider, and my unease and jealousy grew stronger and stronger. Before I knew it, it was getting dark. Henry finally finished his long speech and got up to leave. He walked to the door and turned back to give Ellie a deep look, full of hints and temptations. Ellie's cheeks were slightly red, and there was a trace of reluctance in her eyes. I stood there, vowing to myself that I would find out Henry's true intentions and not let him ruin our lives. And what role was Ellie, the woman I loved, playing in this whirlpool of genetic mutation? Everything was full of unknowns, and I was about to embark on a journey to find the truth. Since Henry's visit, Ellie's changes had been like a quietly growing vine, spreading little by little when I was least expecting it. In the past, Ellie always liked to wear simple and comfortable loungewear, casually tie up her hair, and wear a gentle smile on her face, showing her gentle and quiet nature. But now, she has started buying new clothes frequently, and her closet is full of sexy, fashionable outfits. She spends a lot of time in front of the mirror every day, carefully getting dressed, choosing matching jewelry, and applying brightly colored lipstick, as if she were going on an extremely important date. Not only that, she also became extremely conscious of her figure. Previously, she only did simple exercises occasionally, but now she has gone crazy with fitness. She looks at her body in the mirror every day, her eyes full of scrutiny and expectation. Her diet has also undergone huge changes. The sweet foods and high-calorie foods she used to love are now off limits, replaced by all kinds of vegetable salads and low-calorie foods. Ellie's schedule has also become chaotic. In the past, she always went to bed early with me and woke up early to enjoy the quiet night and morning sunshine. But now, she often has the lights on late at night, pacing back and forth in her room, mumbling to herself as if she is thinking about some profound question. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night and find her bedside is empty, while she is sitting on the sofa in the living room, her eyes staring blankly out the window at the night. In her time with me, Ellie has become increasingly cold and distant. Once, we could talk about anything and share every little thing in our lives. But now, when I try to communicate with her, she is always distracted, her eyes wandering. After a few simple words, she is lost in her own world again. Sometimes, she even suddenly loses her temper with me, accusing me of not understanding her and not supporting her research. Moreover, she is going out more and more often, saying each time that she is going to a lecture on genetic mutations or to discuss research progress with Henry. But when I ask about the specific content, she always evades the question with vague answers. One time, I couldn't hold back any longer and followed her secretly. I saw her and Henry sitting close together in a remote cafe. Henry's hand touched Ellie's arm from time to time, and Ellie not only didn't avoid it, but also smiled shyly. At that moment, my heart felt like it had been hit by a sledgehammer. With anger, pain, and disappointment all mixed together, I knew that Ellie was no longer the wife I knew. She was like a shadow of genetic mutation, gradually losing herself. And I, watching her step by step towards the abyss, was powerless. My inner torment grew day by day. I had to find a solution as soon as possible. Otherwise, I would lose the woman I loved and our lives would be completely shattered. But in this foggy predicament, where should I start? Everything made me feel extremely confused and helpless. The scene I witnessed by chance was like a sharp knife, stabbing my heart and leaving me restless day and night. I have played the scene of Ellie and Henry in the cafe over and over in my mind countless times, and Ellie's shy smile stings my nerves like a needle. I can no longer bear this torment, and I decide to find an opportunity to confront Ellie and get an explanation from her. Finally, one quiet night, Ellie dragged her tired body home. As soon as she entered the door, she walked straight to the sofa, sat down on it, and her eyes were full of exhaustion and confusion. I took a deep breath, walked up to her, knelt down, and held her hands tightly. "Ellie, we need to have a good talk," I said, my voice a little shaky and tinged with pleading. Ellie looked up, her eyes avoiding mine. "What's there to talk about? I'm tired, Jack. Let's talk about this tomorrow." No, Ellie, we can't put this off any longer, I said, raising my voice. I know there's something going on between you and Henry. I saw you in the cafe. Ellie's body jerked, and a look of horror appeared on her face. She tried to break free of my grip, but I held her tightly. After a long silence, tears welled up in her eyes, and she began to speak slowly. It turned out that Henry had painted a rosy picture of the enormous temptations that genetic modification could bring. He claimed that through genetic modification, Ellie could have beauty, intelligence, and abilities beyond the ordinary, and even extend her life. Ellie initially refused, but Henry kept tempting her with various experimental data and bright prospects, and gradually her heart began to waver. Under Henry's persuasion, Ellie participated in his genetic mutation experiment. At first, she only felt some slight changes in her body, such as more energy and smoother, more delicate skin. But as the experiment progressed, she discovered uncontrollable changes in her body and mind. She began to feel a special emotion for Henry, one that resembled dependence and adoration, and this emotion also made it increasingly difficult for her to extricate herself. Jack, I really don't know what's wrong with me. It's like I'm being controlled by an invisible force. I know I'm wrong, but I really don't know what to do. Ellie sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Hearing Ellie's confession, my heart felt as if it had been torn into a million pieces. On the one hand, I was furious and disappointed at her infidelity. On the other hand, I felt sorry for her being so easily seduced by Henry's sweet talk. I tightly embraced her in my arms, trying to offer her some comfort. Ellie, we will work together to solve this problem. No matter what, I will never leave you, I whispered in her ear. But at that moment, my heart was filled with worry. This huge problem caused by genetic mutations, can we really solve it? And will Henry let go? The future is full of unknowns and challenges. In the days after Ellie confessed to me, our lives were caught in a depressing and tense atmosphere. Ellie was depressed all day long, full of self-blame and remorse, while I was torn between anger, pain, and concern for her, while also trying to think of a solution to the problem. However, just as we were enveloped in this heavy gloom, Henry came to the door on his own initiative. It was a gloomy afternoon, with dark clouds in the sky, as if heralding the approach of a storm. The doorbell rang urgently. I opened the door and saw Henry standing outside the door with a serious expression. His eyes lacked the confidence and cunning of the past, replaced by a trace of anxiety and unease. Jack, I want to talk to you about Ellie. Henry's voice was a little low, with a hint of pleading. I looked at him warily, and the anger in my heart instantly rose. What else do you have to say? You've caused Ellie to be in this state. What else do you want to do now? Henry took a deep breath and said slowly, I know you hate me right now, but I came this time to save Ellie. Something went wrong in the experiment, and her genetic mutation is getting out of control. Her bodily functions are beginning to become disordered, and the metabolic rate of her cells has become abnormal. If this continues, her life may be in danger. Hearing Henry's words, my heart tightened, and the anger that had just risen was instantly replaced by worry. I looked back at Ellie, who was hiding at the door of the room. Her face was pale, and her eyes were full of fear and despair. Are you serious? Do you have any way to save her? I asked anxiously. Henry nodded. I have some preliminary ideas, but they need further research and experimentation. However, time is running out. We must act quickly. I hesitated. On the one hand, I was full of disgust and distrust of Henry. It was he who pushed Ellie into this dangerous situation. But on the other hand, it seemed that I had no other choice but to save Ellie. Ellie slowly walked up to me, took my hand, and said in a trembling voice, Jack, no matter what, let's try first. I don't want to die like this. Looking at Ellie's helpless eyes, my heart completely softened. I gritted my teeth and said to Henry, Okay, I'll work with you to find a solution, but if you dare to hurt Ellie again, I will never let you go. Henry nodded slightly, and the three of us reached a tentative agreement. But I knew deep down that this agreement was full of uncertainty. Was Henry's real intention really just to save Ellie? Was there a bigger conspiracy behind the mystery of genetic mutation? And could we successfully save Ellie's life in this race against time? Everything was still unknown, and the road ahead was full of thorns and challenges. We could only grit our teeth and forge ahead. After reaching a tentative cooperation with Henry, we quickly immersed ourselves in the research on Ellie's genetic mutation. Henry led us to his hidden laboratory, which was filled with all kinds of complicated instruments and jars, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of medicine. Ellie lay quietly on the laboratory table, her eyes revealing a trace of fear. I held her hand tightly, trying to offer her some comfort. Henry was busy operating the instruments on the side, collecting various physical data on Ellie. As the research progressed, I gradually discovered some disturbing signs. Henry's experimental records contained a lot of content on genetic enhancement and modification, far exceeding the scope of the simple treatment he had initially said. Moreover, his interpretation of some key data was always vague, as if he was deliberately hiding something. One evening, when Henry went out to get some information, I found an encrypted file on his computer. Curiosity drove me to try to crack it, and after some effort, I finally opened it. The file detailed Henry's true purpose. He wanted to use Ellie's genetic mutation to create a super serum that could control human thought and behavior. Once successful, he could manipulate others through this serum to achieve his own ulterior motives. My heart sank. Henry had been deceiving us all along. I angrily closed the file, my heart filled with conflict. If I exposed Henry's plot now, he would probably give up on Ellie's treatment, and Ellie's life would be in danger. But if I continued to work with him, I would be aiding and abetting evil, and more people would be hurt. Ellie seemed to sense something was wrong with me. She asked softly, "Jack, what's wrong? Did you find something?" I looked at Ellie's frail face and my heart was filled with mixed emotions. I took a deep breath and decided to keep the secret for the time being to avoid causing her further distress. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just rest and we'll find a way to cure you," I said with a forced smile. However, as time passed, my internal struggle became more and more intense. Henry's experiment had also reached a critical stage, and he began preparing for the final step of serum synthesis. I knew that if I didn't make a decision soon, it would be too late. Should I continue to work with Henry and gamble that he will cure Ellie at the last minute, or should I decisively expose his plot, even at the risk of losing Ellie? This difficult choice weighed on me like a heavy stone, suffocating me. Each choice was full of pain and uncertainty, and I had to find a balance between the two, saving Ellie while stopping Henry's evil plan. But it was not easy. I felt like I was in a dark maze, unable to find the exit. I was deeply confused and in pain about how to go forward. In that suffocating state of confusion and pain, every minute felt like a heavy lead weight, weighing me down and making it almost impossible to breathe. The hum of the machines in Henry's laboratory sounded like the devil's whispers, constantly urging me to make a decision. Looking at Ellie's increasingly weak body, I knew I couldn't just sit around any longer. After countless sleepless nights, I finally made up my mind. I could no longer pin my hopes on Henry, that mad scientist. I had to rely on my own strength to save Ellie and at the same time stop his evil plan. I began to secretly collect information related to Henry's experiments. Every time he left the lab, I carefully copied the data and photographed key documents. Those complex genetic maps and obscure experimental records were like a foreign language to me, but I knew that they might be the key clues to unlocking Ellie's predicament. In the process, I asked around and contacted some scientists who had a certain reputation in the scientific community but had parted ways because they disagreed with Henry's ideas. I told them in detail what Henry had done and what had happened to Ellie. Fortunately, a few scientists were moved by my sincerity and were willing to lend a hand. We set up a temporary research team in a secret location and worked day and night to find a way to suppress Ellie's genetic mutation and crack Henry's key technology for creating the super serum. Every time an experiment failed, my heart ached, but I never once considered giving up. Meanwhile, Henry seemed to have sensed my difference. He began to keep a close watch on me, and access to the lab became more restricted. But I wasn't deterred by his actions, and instead my resolve to fight back grew stronger. One day, Henry was busy preparing the final steps of serum synthesis in the laboratory, while I secretly sabotaged some key experimental equipment as planned. When he discovered that the experiment could not continue and roared in anger, I knew that our counterattack had begun. Henry angrily found me, his eyes flashing with ferocity. "Jack, what the hell are you doing? You're risking Ellie's life." I looked him straight in the eye without fear. "Henry, I know about your plot. I won't let you use Ellie's life to achieve your crazy ambitions." Henry sneered. "You think you can stop me? Without my help, Ellie will definitely die. We will find a way, and you won't be able to continue your evil plan," I said firmly. A thrilling battle began. Henry tried to take back the equipment I had destroyed and continue his experiments, while my friends and I did our best to stop him. The sound of the various instruments clashing in the laboratory, combined with our shouts, sounded like the symphony of the end of the world. But I knew that we were fighting for justice and Ellie's life, and no matter how difficult it was, we could not retreat. We must win this desperate fight. The tension in the lab was at a breaking point. Henry was like an enraged beast, his eyes red with fury, as he pounced on me and my colleagues like a madman. His face was a mask of anger and frustration, his twisted expression like that of a demon from hell. "You idiots! How dare you ruin my big plans?" Henry roared, reaching out to grab the key equipment we were protecting. My friends and I formed a tight circle around the equipment, determined not to let him succeed. I sidestepped Henry's attack and shouted, "Friends, we mustn't let him get the equipment, we must stop him." Everyone nodded, their eyes betraying their firm belief. We engaged Henry in a fierce battle, and the bottles and jars in the laboratory were knocked to the ground, and various instruments were also damaged in the chaos. Henry's strength was beyond imagination. He charged recklessly, trying to break through our line of defense. My arm was scratched by him, bleeding profusely, but I ignored the pain and still blocked his way. My friends were also struggling to resist on the side. Some used their bodies to block Henry's attacks, while others were looking for opportunities to counterattack. Just as we were locked in a stalemate with Henry, Ellie's weak voice came from the door of the laboratory. "Jack?" I looked back and saw Ellie standing there with difficulty. Her face was as pale as paper and her body was swaying, but her eyes were full of concern and encouragement for me. "Ellie, why are you here? Get out of here. It's dangerous," I shouted anxiously. Ellie shook her head and walked slowly towards us. "I can't let you face the danger alone. I have to be with you." Her voice was weak, but it revealed a sense of determination. Henry saw Ellie and a flash of hesitation crossed his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by madness. "Ellie, you will not end well if you side with them. Only I can cure you. If you help me get the equipment, I can forget about the past." Ellie shook her head firmly. "Henry, your plot will not succeed, and I will not be used by you again." Henry was completely enraged. He let out a roar and pounced on us recklessly. This time, his attack was even more fierce, and we gradually became unable to resist. Just at the critical moment, I suddenly thought of a way. I signaled my friends to back off for a moment, and then as Henry charged at us, I deftly dodged, causing him to miss and crash into the nearby lab bench. Henry was knocked dizzy, and my friends and I pounced on him, pinning him to the ground. Henry struggled and cursed, but we didn't give him any chance. We quickly bound him up, making sure he couldn't pose any more of a threat to us. This thrilling final confrontation was finally over, and we had successfully stopped Henry's evil plan. Looking at each other's tired but triumphant faces, I knew that we had won this difficult battle for justice and Ellie's life. Ellie's future would also be full of hope because of our efforts. But we also understood that the end of this battle was just the beginning of a new one, and we still needed to completely solve the problem of Ellie's genetic mutation and restore her health. After successfully subduing Henry and stopping his evil plan, we did not immediately experience relief and peace. Ellie's body was still very weak, and the effects of the genetic mutation continued to torment her. My partners and I did not dare to relax for a moment. We quickly left the gloomy laboratory with Ellie and began to devote ourselves to her treatment. We settled Ellie in a quiet and comfortable place, a cabin far from the hustle and bustle of the city, surrounded by a lush forest and fresh, pleasant air. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window and fell on Ellie's pale face, I would silently pray in my heart for her early recovery. In order to find a cure for Ellie's genetic mutation, my friends and I consulted a large amount of information and countless experts. We tried every possible treatment, and every failure made us feel frustrated. But we never gave up. Although Ellie was weak, her will was incredibly strong. She always encouraged us with a smile, telling us that she believed she would recover. During the treatment, we also did not forget to deal with Henry's affairs. We made his plot public and let him receive the due legal punishment. People who had been deceived by him also woke up and expressed their contempt for what he had done. As the days passed, with our unremitting efforts, Ellie's body finally showed signs of improvement. Her face gradually regained its rosy complexion, and her body was no longer as weak as before. Seeing her change, we were all extremely gratified and excited. The day when Ellie was finally able to walk out of the cabin and roam freely in the forest was like the best day of our lives. She breathed in the fresh air, felt the warmth of the sun, and her face was filled with a happy smile. I held her hand tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. After this ordeal, Ellie and I became even closer. We were no longer the ordinary couple we once were. We had experienced life and death together, and our hearts were more closely connected. We decided to leave the city, which was full of painful memories, and start a new life in a new place. We sold our old house, packed our bags, and set off on a new journey. In the new city, we rented a cozy little apartment and started a brand new life. Ellie rediscovered her love for life and started learning to paint, using her paintbrush to depict our bright future. I also found my own value in my new job and was full of energy every day. Although we know that the road ahead may still be full of challenges, we are no longer afraid. Because we believe that as long as we love and support each other, there is no difficulty we cannot overcome. The storm of genetic mutations has become a part of our past, and our future is full of hope and sunshine. We look forward to each new day and creating our own happy life in this new city.